Hello everybody watching on YouTube, and welcome to race number 35, also the penultimate race of Season 2 NNSCRA Marvel Studios Cup Series. I'm Levi McIntyre, the voice of the NNSCRA Marvel Studios Cup Series, here to welcome you to the Jack in the Box 350 here at Sawmill Speedway as we're getting set for 14 laps of racing on this 2-mile road course. And man, only one race left, the Kansas race, after this race to conclude the season. But before we look at the lineup, let's take a look and see how the top 10 in the points look. So, after last week at Phoenix, Nelson Thornhill lost a bit of his points lead. He only leads by 10 points over David Rivera, 32 over Chris Michaels, 36 over Dorian Facepuncher, and 62 over Rafael Leduc. Rest of the top 10 is Seth Cole, Nathaniel Reed, DJ Curtis, Dylan Thoreau, and Joshua Sekuli. So, some of the main scenarios for a few drivers in this race. Rafael Leduc is going to have to try and finish in the top 5 and hope that Nelson Thornhill finishes 35th on back if he's going to be mathematically in contention for the championship next week at Kansas. Chris Michaels and Dorian Facepuncher are going to have to finish at least 12 to 13 positions. Well, Dorian Facepuncher has to finish 14 positions ahead of Nelson Thornhill. Chris Michaels has to finish 11 positions over Nelson or actually 12 positions over Nelson Thornhill. And David Rivera, all he's got to do is just maintain a good finish and be within reach of the championship, and he'll still be in contention. So, this race is going to make or break who's going to challenge for the championship at Kansas next week. But let's take a look at the starting lineup. Starting in the last row is Jesse King, and Nelson Thornhill for the second week in a row struggles in qualifying and ends up starting dead last. So, let's take a look at the top 10. Rafael Leduc, 5th pole this season. Starting next to him is Joshua Sekuli. Row 2 is Angel Alvera, Kev Shearer. Row 3 is JT Bryant, Dylan Young. Row 4, Benjamin Miles, Jonathan Zorleen. And then row 5, Chris Dollarton and Preston Plord. With that being said, let's get the command to fire engines for the Jack in the Box 350 at Sawmill.
Drivers, start your engines!
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. And then, of course, one big factor that's going to be in play for this race is pit strategy. So it's all about when you're going to pit, how fast the pit stop is, and how fast you can get up to speed in time before something happens. So, especially these drivers among the top 10 are going to have to definitely keep that in mind throughout the course of this race. They may have to pit twice, but I do think it's only a one-stop race, so I think it'll be around the halfway point, around lap 7, lap 8, so we shall see how it's going to all play out for these drivers. As the pace car pulls in the pit road, which means it is time to boogity, 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 go racing! Well, Joshua Sekuli ended up passing Rafael Leduc for the lead before they got to the line that time. But Leduc's still within reach, but then you also got Dylan Young within reach as well. So it's top 3 all fighting for some spots. Dylan Young thought about making a move on the bottom, and now he's going to make the move underneath Rafael LeDuc to try to send him back to 3rd. But now LeDuc could end up with the advantage right here as we're about to approach a left, or now it's a right-hander. But Dylan Young's got the bottom. Is he going to clear LeDuc? Yes, he will. So we got a new second-place driver, Dylan Young. So LeDuc is definitely starting to panic a little bit. He needs to maintain top 5, and where's Thornhill? He's still running dead last, so as long as, like I said, if LeDuc can finish top 5 and Thornhill finishes 35th or worse, LeDuc will be mathematically still in the hunt for the championship next week at Kansas. Let's see, according to scoring, where the 6, the 17, and the 62 were. Michaels was in 17th, Face Puncher 19th, and Rivera was 39th. Something's gone wrong with David Rivera, or I guess he just lost a ton of ground. But he's still a couple spots ahead of the 78. Well, now he may be only 1 spot ahead, so he'd only gain, actually 2 spots ahead, so he'd gain 2 points right now over the 78, so it'd shorten the points lead down to 8 points if the race were to be over right then and there. But anyways, Joshua Sekuli, who is a Rookie of the Year contender and comes into this race 10th in the points, not the current rookie points leader. That's actually Mark Lane, who's in 13th, who won last week at Phoenix. As we look at the margin of the lead, and it's only 0.3 of a second that separate the top 2 and 0.7 of a second with the top 3. So the top 3 are still within reach of each other for potentially the lead and maybe the win if their pit stops don't end up being messed up. But Sekuli won a race earlier this season. I can't remember as to where it was, but he has already won a race in his career and this season. He will be back in the series next season, but he'll be in the number 30 car for Tweenix Racing. So moving on to a brand new team for Sekuli. Well, not a brand new team as in the team is new, but a new ride for that team. I think the last time the 30 car existed for Tweenix Racing was back in the Walmart Cup Series days. Back up at the front, Dylan Young actually is slowly catching the 11. Managed to gain 0.04 of a second on that lap. Let's see the lap time differences. Yeah, pretty much fair enough. As meanwhile, as we see David Rivera fighting with Dylan Poteet, and that's for 40th, and that would end up costing the 6 a point. And now Nelson Thornhill's coming into the picture to try and gain a point on David Rivera to make it 11 points separating those two. But when we get to Kansas, all bets are going to be off, because doesn't matter what happens, whoever can win it is going to win it. And I'm talking about the championship, to be exact. As meanwhile, Dylan Young has a run, potentially for the lead. He thought about making the move, but he couldn't quite get there. But the margin has definitely shrunk to under 0.2 of a second. And Dylan Young, I believe he started 4th. I want to say he started 4th. Jumped over ahead of Rafael LeDuc in the 2nd, and now is right on close to the back bumper of the 11 of Joshua Sekuli. As meanwhile, Rafael LeDuc's watching this, hoping that if they're going to race it out, they go aggressively so he can maybe catch back up to the top 2. But you can tell he's definitely the slowest of the top 3, and then they got a big gap between themselves back to Angel Oliveira in 4th. Although it seems like right around in an earlier corner, Sekuli actually managed to pull away from the 2. But let's see if the 2 can make some of that ground up. I don't know if he did. Let's see the margin this time. It might be the same, maybe a little bigger. Just only a 1/10 of a second, or not a 1/10, a 100th of a second, Sekuli had a better lap. Barely, though. They almost had identical lap times. as we're getting around the halfway point, and some cars have already decided to come into pit road, including 4th place Angel Alvera. David Rivera's in pit road. Everybody else staying out, at least for another extra lap. So this is definitely going to create some interesting aspects going forward, as meanwhile Dylan Young is still trying to figure out how to get around the 11, but he may not be one to think about that for too much longer, because they may end up coming into pit road whenever they get close to pit road, which is here, and they are coming in. So does LeDuc. Although one guy's staying out, and that's James Shelley. James Shelley staying out. Is anybody else going to stay out? Looks like Phil Parker's going to stay out, so only 2 guys stayed out, Shelley and Parker, as we're looking around to see who's going to get out of pit road first. Is Rafael LeDuc. I think he's getting into his stall now. So I'm looking around to see where the 2 and the 11 are. Oh, and some contact with JT Bryant and somebody. Dylan Young right behind the 11. But what about the 99? Where is he? He's coming out now. Oh, it's going to be really close. And LeDuc actually beat out Dylan Young. Oh, but Sekuli, you got to remember, Sekuli gets the wall. And now LeDuc takes back the lead. Well, not the actual lead, but in theory it would be the lead. But Shelley still is yet to pit, same with Parker. And now Shelley has entered pit road, and now we wait on Phil Parker to come into pit road. And there he goes. So if everything cycles around, this could be your fight for the lead. Dylan Young, Rafael LeDuc fighting it out right now, as Dylan Young trying to clear the 99, and he does, and then ironically the same corner that Dylan Young cleared LeDuc earlier for 2nd. And Sekuli falls back to what could be 4th place after he scraped the wall and basically just cost himself potentially the win. As there's Parker and Shelley. I think they're going to easily get by Parker and Shelley, so it looks like everything is going to cycle around to Dylan Young being the race leader for now. So now that everything is cycled around and we're past the halfway point, let's take a look and see where everybody is currently running on track. Dylan Young is your leader. 2nd is Rafael LeDuc. 3rd is Angel Alvera. 4th is Joshua Sekuli. 5th, Benjamin Miles. 6th is Emmanuel Hartnett. 7th, James Shelley. 8th, Chris Dollerton. 9th is P.J. Williams. 10th, Preston Plord. 11th, Johnny Gardner. 12th is Kev Shearer. 13th, J.T. Bryant. 14th, Seth Cole. 15th, Anthony McCurry. 16th, Zach Rogers. 17th is Charles Sanford. 18th, Chris Michaels. 19th, David Rivera. 20th, Carson Gum. 21st, Matt McIntyre. 22nd, Nathaniel Reed. 23rd, Dorian Facepuncher. 24th, Austin LaPlante. 25th, Charles Jackson. 26th is Jonathan Zorling. 27th, Sean Galligan. 28th, DJ Curtis. 29th, Mark Lane. 30th, Phil Parker. 31st is Dylan Thoreau. 32nd, Nelson Thornhill, so he actually moved up 10 spots. That's got to be a bit of a concern for the 99 right now. Trent Dunham in 33rd. 34th, Grayson Acevedo. 35th is Joshua Collard. 36th, Dylan Poteet. 37th, Andrew Rich. 38th, Jesse King. 39th, Paul Minnick. 40th, Dougie Shears. 41st, James Qualls. And then 42nd is Matt Haas. Back up at the front, Dylan Young pulling away from the 99 of Rafael LeDuc, who's in 2nd. So, as it were to stand right now, LeDuc would gain 30 points on the 78, which would put him 32 points behind the points lead going into next week. So, if everything settles out the way it is, LeDuc will still be mathematically in contention for the championship, though he's going to be arguably the long shot driver to try and win the title. but he will be in mathematical contention if everything is the way it is right now. Thornhill's still in 32nd, and LeDuc's still in 2nd. As meanwhile, Dylan Young, who's 23rd in the points, fell down a few spots after finishing dead last week at Phoenix, is your leader right now with 3 laps to go here at Sawmill, trying to go for his first win this season, and I think his first win of his Marvel Studios Cup Series career, and he's a former Walmart Cup Series champion. But he is trying to go for his first win in this series in hopes of trying to end his season here in Season 2 on a high note. But we're coming close to 2 laps to go here in Sawmill. And we got a couple cars, or actually 1 car coming into pit road, Paul Minnick, and you gotta wonder about some of these guys who pitted really early, if they're going to be able to make it on gas the rest of the way or not, or are they going to come in? As Minnick back out onto the racetrack, as meanwhile Dylan Young now has nearly a 1.5 second lead over the 99 at the current moment. Looks like nobody else came in the pit road that time, so it looks like they either might try and stretch it, at least a few of the cars who pitted first in the first group of cars, they may try and stretch it out, but everybody else is good to go on gas as they pitted a lap later or 2 laps later. And Dylan Young right now pulling away from the 99, is speaking of the 99 and the battles, Angel Alvara's slowly been reeling in the 99 of Rafael LeDuc. I don't know if he's going to have enough time to go by the 99. But I tell you, the 87 has been slowly catching the 99 gradually ever since they got done with pit stops, as the white flag is out for Dylan Young here in the Jack in the Box 350 at Sawmill. And the margin, all under 2 seconds. And Angel Alvara is a half a second behind the 99. He may be able to pull off a move, but I don't know. It's going to be very, very tough. As we look around, Dylan Poteet pulling in the pit road. So the 31 goes in the pit road as we're trying to get back up to the front. And there is Dylan Young, as meanwhile Alvara still trying to catch the 99. But it doesn't look like he's going to be able to go by him in time as we're approaching the final corners of the race. And Dylan Young has basically got this in the bag. All he's got to do is just not make a mistake, and he's good to go, and it looks like he's going to be good. Coming out of the final corner for win number 1 of his career in the series, Dylan Young wins the Jack in the Box 350 at Sawmill. Dylan Young wins the penultimate race this season. So now, 1 race left in Season 2, Kansas. But let's look at the rest of the results. Great, much-needed great points run for the 99 of Rafael LeDuc. Comes through the great run in 2nd. Angel Alvara was the highest finishing rookie in 3rd. Joshua Sekuli, arguably the dominant car of the day. A little mishap coming out of pit road is what cost him potentially the win, but still comes through with a great run in 4th. Solid 5th place run for Benjamin Miles. Great run in 6th for James Shelley. Solid 7th place finish for Chris Dollarton. Great run in 8th for Emmanuel Hartnett. Solid 9th place finish for PJ Williams, and a great run in 10th for Johnny Gardner. Rest of the top 20 was Preston Plord, Kev Shearer, JT Bryant, Seth Cole, Anthony McCrory, Zach Rogers, Chris Michaels, Charles Sanford, David Rivera, Carson Gum. And then the rest of the top 30 was Nathaniel Reed, Matt McIntyre, Dorian Facepuncher, Austin LaPlante, Sean Galligan, Charles Jackson, Jonathan Zorline, David Rivera, Mark Lane, or not David Rivera, DJ Curtis, then Mark Lane, Phil Parker. Top 40, Dylan Thoreau, Nelson Thornhill, Trent Dunham, Grayson Acevedo, Andrew Rich, Jesse King, Dougie Shears, Joshua Collard, James Qualls, and Matt Haas. And the final 2 cars were Paul Minnick and Dylan Poteet. So, we're actually going to do live points for this. So we're going to do live exporting for this because we got to figure out how the top 5 and the points are going to look whenever we get to Kansas for the finale next week. As I'm trying to back out of here. There we go. So now we're about to get the point standings coming up, but a lot of interesting scenarios were to occur for some drivers in order to get themselves either back in the hunt or still be in the hunt. But we do know for sure that David Rivera will definitely be your points leader going into next week, as he clearly finished way ahead of Nelson Thornhill. But now we're about to find out who the top 5 is going for next week. So David Rivera takes the points lead over, but by 3 points. 3 points over Nelson Thornhill, 20 over Chris Michaels, 30 over Dorian Facepuncher, and 34 over Rafael Leduc. So, all 5 of the drivers in the top 5 in points are in the hunt mathematically for the championship. So, the scenarios. David Rivera will have to at least be within 3 positions of maintaining the championship. But if it were to be a tie, we would have co-champions, since we don't have tiebreakers for the championship. We do co-champions if we have a tie. But if Thornhill was to win the title, he would have to finish 4 spots ahead of David Rivera to win. Chris Michaels, 20 points, so that's a little less than half the field points, but he would have to finish 20 spots or more ahead of Rivera and 18 or more, or 17 or more over Thornhill, in hopes that that's the scenario for the 17 car, Chris Michaels, in hopes of winning the title. Dorian Facepuncher and Rafael Leduc are the 2 primary long shot drivers. They would have to hope essentially that the top 3 wreck and they finish among the top 5 in order to win this title. So much can happen. After all, with Kansas, constant passing will happen. But until then, here are your results, rookie points, and regular points heading into Kansas. And this is Levi Mack.